woke up around 8 and I was like, you know what would be fun? What if I read as many pages as I possibly could today? So that's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna read as many pages as I possibly can. Oh, I read Woven and Moonlight by Isabel Ibañez for about a couple hours. So far I'm really enjoying it. I started on page 174 and now I'm on page 259, so almost 100 pages, but yeah, this is gonna be very unrealistic how many pages I can read, because realistically I wouldn't wake up and then sit for 2 hours straight to read unless it was like an amazing book. I'm not saying that it isn't, but I mean like on a normal typical day I usually wake up and like scroll for 2 hours instead of read. So that's what my plan is, and since this is unrealistic, I'm definitely gonna be listening to audiobooks once I finish Woven and Moonlight. I have to do some laundry, but I'm hoping to finish this book before, I don't know, 1 or something, but I thought it would be fun to see how many pages I can unrealistically read in one day without tracking time, because I feel like tracking my time is just adding another barrier to my reading. It doesn't prevent me from reading, but it just kind of like doesn't make me want to read if I track my time. But I'm hoping to one day do it, but it's okay. For now it's like I'm keeping a general sense of how long I've been reading, and I'm tracking how many pages I'm gonna be reading for just today. It's rainy, but not in a very cozy way. In more of a like, you're gonna be sick and, you know, cry about it later type of rain. But that's okay, you know? Anyway, Woven and Moonlight is about this girl who is pretending to be somebody that she isn't for the sake of her people. She's like a villain for the time being, and because of that she has pretty much gotten herself into the enemy's territory, if you will. Because of that she's learning a lot about her enemies and what their views of like the world are, and she's learning about their culture, and she's a great weaver, so she's learning about this magic that she has, and it's really interesting so far. I'm really enjoying it. I can tell there's gonna be a big twist, so I'm excited for that to happen, and I'm trying to guess what it is, but I really don't know. I have the second book on my shelf. I don't know if I'll pick it up today, but so far I'm really enjoying it, and I really like it. So I thought there would be more romance in it, but so far that I'm aware of, not much, and I'm more than 2/3 into the book, so we'll see. I like it so far, and yeah, I'll finish it today. Okay, so I just finished Woven and Moonlight by Isabel Ibañez. It's like a slow burn. I was low-key kind of like, oh, I don't even know if there's gonna be romance in this. Like, I know that, like, I figured there would be, but I guess I was just wrong to assume. 300 pages in, finally. Such a good slow burn. I don't think I've ever read such a good, like, detailed slow burn in such a long time. I love it so much. Okay, so I read from page 174 to I read the acknowledgements and everything, so that includes 375. 174? Is that right? That must mean that I read 200 pages so far, and it's like 1 o'clock so far. I guess that shows how much of a slow reader I am, and this is like kind of unusual for me. I don't really sit down and read like this that often, but I'm doing laundry right now, so I'm gonna start playing an audiobook. I started reading Me Talk Pretty One Day. I don't know who the author is, but I'll put it right here. But yeah, so far I like it. I think I've only read like 1 chapter. It's about this, I want to say, younger boy that has a lisp and he can't say his S's. Anyway, so I finished Woven in Moonlight. I love it so much. It got so much better, even though it took a long time for me to like really get into it. I love how the characters seem to grow and they are able to say, yeah, I was kind of wrong, like my first impressions of you weren't quite what you are, and I'm really happy that I got to meet you and you got to change my view about, you know, the entirety of what I thought was wrong. I just think that's such a good point, because a lot of people don't want to have their viewpoints changed because their pride, you know, it happens to everybody. But being able to say that, like, yeah, I was wrong and what you are isn't at all what I was expecting, and because of our encounter and our conversations, I've grown as a person and I've learned to appreciate you and your culture and everything. So I'm really glad that I read this book. It was so good. And I have the second one, but I have so many other books from the library that I have checked out that I want to like get to, so I might start reading another book that I have physically, or I could just continue reading Me Talk Pretty One Day. I don't know. I'll figure it out. So far, about 200 pages. Probably a little more because I started reading Me Talk Pretty One Day. I'm hoping to finish that and then I could just count the number of pages that I get off Goodreads, because I don't have the physical book. But anyway, I love this cover too. It's kind of a ramble, but I actually really enjoyed it. I love the themes that it has, and I love the cultural aspects from her Bolivian, I don't know, ancestry. She has like the foods. I didn't know what salteñas were. They're baked football-shaped empanada from Bolivia, filled with beef, pork, or chicken, raisin peas, and exactly 1 black olive and boiled egg. The juice is like a stew and made with gelatin. When baked, the gelatin slowly melts and turns into a soup inside the dough, which sounds so good. Sandwich de chola, silpancho, sopa de maní, maracuya. I remember when I went to Colombia for a week for a study abroad, that's all I could eat. They had jugo de maracuya, or agua de maracuya, I think it was, and I couldn't get enough of it. I had never had it before, and honestly, it was so eye-opening to go to Colombia and be like, maracuya, what is that? Here's this passion fruit, drinking fruit in Bolivia as popular as drinking fountain sodas, often more so. Popular choices are maracuya, durazno, peach, fresa, strawberry, and pera pear. You can blend them with water or milk. So that's what I was saying. In Colombia, they do the same thing. And then she also has not just like Spanish words and aspects in her book, but also quechua, which are, I believe, indigenous people of Bolivia. Super quick side note, quechua is a language along with a group of people that primarily live in Peru, but also live in parts of Ecuador and Bolivia. Initially, I thought that they only lived in Peru, but I was wrong. They're a group of indigenous people, including the language, the food, and the culture that live along here. I wanted to fact check myself really quick, and that's why I put this extra added bit in here. So she has Quechua words in here like atok, which means fox, and that's the name of the king. I could be pronouncing this wrong, I don't speak Quechua. Sisa means flower, Suyana means hope, Tamaya means center, Taruka means dough. Dough isn't deer? I don't know. And Umak means oh. I feel like that's kind of a spoiler. Anyway, I totally recommend it. I loved it so much. Outside, it feels so like cozy. This time it's like a cozy rain vibe. I finished Me Talk Pretty One Day by David Sedaris, and I low-key was way off about this book. I thought I found it on a list of top 10 books every teenage girl should read before she leaves high school, or before she enters high school, or I think it was before she leaves high school. I was expecting like Me Talk Pretty One Day to be about a girl who's suffering from some sort of like issue, like inner turmoil, mental disorder, something like that. It was not that at all. It was about a comedian's life, and since I listened to the audiobook, there was a lot of snippets of his live show and live performances, and it was not at all what I was expecting. It kind of struck me by surprise, simply because I wasn't expecting that at all. I was expecting like a high school teenage girl who's going through some things, and instead it was about an adult man that is suffering with figuring out life in general and living in France, and it was just not what I was expecting at all. I finished that book as well. I forgot to find out what the number of pages is, but I'll put that right there. That would sum up my total number of pages. I don't know if I'll read anymore for the rest of tonight. It's like 8:30, I think, or 9, and it's getting pretty late. I'm almost done with the laundry, but I don't want to start another audiobook because I know I'm not going to finish it, so I'd rather read like a physical book and see where I go from there. And so yeah, I finished one book and started and finished another, and I might just go ahead and start a third. And this is so peculiar of me. I usually don't read this much in one day. That's why it's so unrealistic. Like, I don't read this much in one day, like, ever. But hey, who knew I would catch up to my goal with this? I didn't really that would happen either. But yeah, pretty surprised. I went to Subway with my mom. I always ask for extra olives, and the person that was like making my sandwich literally grabbed like a whole handful of olives and like slapped it on, and I was like, there's more olives than bread in that sandwich. It was so good. I love black olives. Totally successful reading day. Probably won't happen in a while, like ever again, but I still had a lot of fun with just kind of seeing how much I could read. I didn't read for like 8 hours straight, but it was still quite a bit of hours in one day because I did take breaks, but a lot of reading was done. So slay. So yeah. Hello. It's been a while since I've read the 2 books, and this is like my wrap up, kind of like outro review type bit, but I wanted to mention that I really enjoyed both books, especially Woven in Moonlight by Isabel Ibañez, but I like to like go through other people's reviews to like finalize my thoughts. I know that's not quite like the best thing to do, but I stumbled upon something really interesting that I didn't know about the book, about it being inspired by Bolivian politics. And I don't know about you, but I don't know, like, I know pretty much nothing about Bolivian politics. The person that wrote this review pretty much says that, I'm quoting the review here, "The problem here is that this author divides the people in this world, Incasisa, into 2 camps. The good Illustrians, which are very recognizable, the mestizo and Spanish portion of the Bolivian population, as anyone familiar with the country will notice, and the bad, forgive my mispronunciation, Jacksans, and the bad Jacksons, who are indigenous people of Bolivia, clearly, and whose leader is very obviously based on Evo Morales, the former socialist Amerindian president of Bolivia." They go on to explain that there's a lot of history that goes on in this. I didn't really think much about it. I'm not super into politics or anything like that, so I didn't really think too deeply. I was more like, oh, the characters are so cool, and so are the whole plot, and I really like the romance. But I think it's a good thing to note. I still don't really know where I stand in this, since I don't really know much about the whole... Okay, sorry, I'm back. I think I was talking about the whole Bolivian politics thing. I don't really know where I stand in that instance, because I don't know much about it or Bolivian politics. But I also feel like the theme had a lot to do with misunderstanding people. I'm just not very sure how much I like the idea of like putting it in an American perspective, where Europeans came, and then like if this were a story about an indigenous Native American here, and then they learned that, you know, their ways and their rituals and their religion and their culture wasn't necessarily like good, so they need to follow what the Europeans are doing or whatever. It's kind of like how it went, but it's just a thought that I'm gonna have to keep in mind with this. It kind of sours the book a little, but I think it's important to know. And then another additional thing that I wanted to say is that the second book that I read and finished by David Sedaris is actually a collection of essays. I think I rated it like 3 stars. Let me check. Yeah, I gave it like 3 stars. It was okay. It wasn't like, even like now, I might have read it too fast. It wasn't really my cup of tea, and it was good. It wasn't amazing. It wasn't great. He has a pretty good voice, but you know, for a comedian, I only laughed a couple times. Maybe it's because I have a different sense of humor, but it wasn't really necessarily what I particularly enjoyed. So 3 stars, but I still did enjoy the all of his essays, and especially listening to him like perform live in the snippets of the audiobook. So that was nice, but aside from that, like, I don't remember much about the book. It was just another book that I read, another memoir, which isn't quite the best thing to say, but I think that's mostly just a me thing, not a very good critique of the book. But yeah, thanks for watching. I appreciate you staying till the end if you did. It was just a day of me reading and setting unrealistic standards for myself for how many pages I need to read a day, which I think was 497 total, which is pretty good. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Maybe you learned something, because I did, and hopefully you'll stay for another one. Let me know how many pages you often read, how many pages you think you could unrealistically read in one day, and or just how many pages you read in one day, or how many pages you consistently read in one day, or like the average, which for me is pretty low, maybe like 10. But yeah, hope you enjoyed. I'll see you in the next one.